4520. That's the largest caliber buffalo cartridge from the 45 caliber family. And there is nothing like when you make it work. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Capandball here, your favorite gun channel in beautiful bright English language, and I have quite a few buffalo rifles for you on my right, and I also have some cartridges for you. That is a 4570. This is what I use for long range shooting. That's loaded with 70 grains of black powder, 2 black powder, and a grease groove bullet. That's a 4590. This is an express load, meaning it's a light bullet for flat trajectory, for hunting with my 1886 Winchester. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 4520, or more accurately, the 45 3.25" cartridge. Sharp straight. I love that. That's the largest capacity black powder cartridge in the 45 caliber family. The 4520 is not really the most popular cartridge among all the 45 calibers, and we usually say that there is nothing a 4520 can do that the 4570 is not capable of. And this is partially true, as I've been shooting long range with this cartridge, and it works. But today is a special day because I have a real beast for you. This is, oh, it's heavy. This is Pedersoli's 1874 long-range sharps, chambered for the 4520 round. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break in the beast and we are going to see what kind of accuracy we can expect. First at 100, then at 200 meters, and later on, then we can step on to further ranges as well. Come with me. But before we go on, let me thank you for your support. Your donations from Patreon are very important for keeping the quality of the channel high. If you wish to know more about our Patreon presence, then please visit the page patreon.com/capandball. Here you will find exclusive content, and also you can get information about the benefits I offer to the supporters. We are also present on a new platform called History of Weapons and War. This is an ad-free environment. It's a paid platform, so meet you there as well. If you have a question to Capandball, then please ask it in the pinned comment in the comment section. If you like what I do, then please subscribe to the channel, share this information with others, and also please comment and like the video. That helps the channel to grow. If you check the shooting forums about the 4520 cartridge and those rifles, of course, then probably you will find mostly negative comments. Here are my favorite ones. Unless your buddy has ordered a 20-pound rifle, he will probably end up wishing he had bought a 4590. That's an easy. I have a 4590 already, so I have done that round. The next one is from an experienced shooter. Having you given any thoughts as how freaking hard it is to keep the fooling under control in a 4520? Good night. It's almost impossible on hot days. I love that. And the next one is at the end of the line already. It took me exactly 100 rounds to decide that the 4520 was worthless to anything I wanted to use it for. That's clear. And the next one is the best. Instructions for the range officer. Let him sight his gun in at 50 yards. Firing prone for accuracy and stability. He will probably fire 2 rounds, one to see what it's like, and one to see if the first one was real. After it sits in the rack for a year, you might be able to buy it for half of what he paid and have it rebarreled for a sane cartridge. I love those challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the 4520 has absolutely a negative picture in target shooters, but this was invented for something, so it must work. So now I'm going to develop a load for that, and I'm going to try to break in this beast. But before starting the project, I have 2 rules to set. This is an excellent challenge for Capandball. So the first rule is that I know that it will work with 4570 or 4590 loads. This is an accurate rifle. I'm pretty sure that it will fire the bullet with the same accuracy as a normal 4570 Pedersoli or Shiloh rifle. But what's the use of charging your 120 case with 70 or 80 grains of powder? So, which means that I will definitely set a minimum level of 100 grains of powder charge in the cartridge. The second rule I will set is I will not accept anything else that is close to 1 meter of angle group, because that's the entrance level for the real long range shooting. When this whole story started, I only had a handful of cartridge cases for the 3¼ inch length, and I did not have dies either. But this is not such a great problem. With a little creativity, you can overcome this problem on the range. You only need a loading block, a hammer and a primer tool, so you can recharge your cases easily with black powder. The process starts with decapping the spent cases. Now comes the priming. In this case, it is done with an original Ideal tool. A mighty charge of 100 grains of black powder. A cardboard wad to protect the base of the bullet. And the 525 grain Lyman postal bullet, unsized, lubed with mix of tallow, beeswax and synthetic engine oil, cast from 1 to 30 tin lead alloy. Let's talk a bit about these Pedersoli rifles. So this is the 1874 long-range model, and it has a 34-inch barrel. It's an octagonal to round barrel. It is, out of the box, it is equipped with an open sight. This is a leather-style open sight. This is exactly very close to the ones that they used by the buffalo hunters. The buffalo hunters didn't really use these diopter sights because it is not practical for hunting. So the rifle is equipped with a set trigger system, just as the buffalo rifles. It has a pistol grip for comfortable shooting, and it has a beautiful high comb that will allow you to shoot the rifle also in the prone position well. It also has a straight butt, which is also very good for prone position, and it's, let's say, it's a dual position rifle because it is good for offhand as well. But if you're shooting with the offhand, then be prepared that it's a heavy rifle. It's a very heavy rifle. Although the barrel is octagon to round, the center of gravity is somewhere here, and the weight of the rifle is 5.1 kilograms, so this is heavy. You are going to get tired. But otherwise, it's a very, very good rifle. And the weight, of course, can be an advantage if you're shooting a strong cartridge. Let's talk a bit about the buffalo hunt era. First of all, the buffalo hunt era is actually the American bison hunt era because buffalo is American bison. This era lasted from the end of the 1860s up until the middle of the 1880s, and this is a killing machine. This is not ethical sports hunting as we think about it today. This was actually annihilating the large herds on the plains. These hunts were conducted by 3 to 12 person teams that was organized around 1 or 2 hunters. Everybody in the team had its own roles. So there were cooks, there were skinners, there were hide peggers, there were reloaders, and of course there were the hunters. Each of the hunters usually had 1 or 2 rifles at least that they used alternately. And the wagons had to carry a large supply of lead and powder for the hunters. So the hunter was active usually in the mid-morning hours. He shot the game from a rest, usually a cross stick. The first game to shoot was the leader cow, and using the confusion in the herd, losing the leader, that offered a good possibility to shoot as many game as possible, as many as that could be skinned in one day. The hunter usually used a pair of rifles, so when the barrel of one got hot, then it was put away, lay away, until it cooled down, and switched to the other rifle. Often the barrels were cooled with water or urine, but please don't do this on the range because otherwise it will look a bit strange for your shooting mates. From one shooting stand it was possible to shoot even 100 or 120 buffaloes. That's a great number. When the shooting was done, then came the skinners. While they were working, the hunter started to search for next day's herd. And also he protected the team members from the enemies. My first cartridge was doing quite well. The grease groove bullet is not a bad option, but due to the high muzzle velocity it was not easy to keep the fouling and leading under control. It worked well with a clean bore, but flyers came more often. The key element of this job was the large caliber single-shot rifle that could deliver a strong punch even above 200-300 yards distance. The first Buffalo rifles were not heavy. The rifles got heavier in the middle of the 1870s, with a weight averaging between 14 to 16 pounds. That's a heavy rifle. Usually, these were not fancy rifles. They were simple rifles that were built to last and built to work. If you find one today in collections, it is usually in bad shape because they were really well used rifles. So probably the complete finish is missing, probably the barrel is shot out, or if it is not shot out, then it was rebarreled sometimes in his life. But these were simple rifles for rugged use. The excellent reputation of the Sharps rifle as the reliable rifle was born in the American Civil War. The Union Army bought around 90,000 rifles from the Sharps Manufacturing Company, which was mainly carbines, cavalry carbines like the one here, and also around 9,000 infantry rifles. Now, after the war, there was a large stock of surplus military Sharps rifles available to the public. Billy Dixon, for example, the crackshot buffalo hunter, shot his first bison or buffalo with a cavalry carbine like this. Well, this was not a long-range shot. He was chasing the game on a mule, and after he got into the perfect range, he fired his 54 caliber or 52 caliber Sharps percussion breechloader, and that was the first ever bison or buffalo he shot. And it was done with the percussion Sharps. This was also the time when the metallic cartridges came in, and converting a Sharps breech-loading percussion rifle to fire a centerfire cartridge was quite easy, because you just had to modify the breech block or replace the breech block and modify the hammer, and then you go. It will fire a centerfire cartridge as well. The action was strong, so it was absolutely an excellent choice for breech-loading conversions. If you want to learn more about the early history of the Sharps company, please check my video about the percussion Sharps carbines of the American Civil War. More than 40 minutes of black powder burning and history. Today we call these Sharps rifles, this system, the model 1874, but in fact the first Sharps manufactured rifles that were intended immediately to fire the metallic cartridges came out in 1871, so we should rather call it the model 1871 Sharps, but nobody knows what's that, so let's stay with the 1874. The year 1874, by the way, was a great change in the life of the Sharps company as well, because this was the year when Richard Lawrence, the owner of the company, died. By the way, Christian Sharps also died this year. A group of investors reorganized the company and carried on under the name Sharps Rifle Company. In 1874, they launched a new product, which was actually not a new product, but the model 1871 Sharps rifle, but they designated it the model 1874 Old Reliable Rifle. Now, this nickname was quite known for all the Sharps rifles, and from this point it was used for the 1874 models. Their guns were not cheap. Usually a Winchester rifle was sold in the beginning of the 70s for $10 US, while a Sharps like this, well, that was over $30 US, so 3 times more. But there was a market for these guns, because the Buffalo runners, they needed a large caliber single-shot rifle that could deliver that punch that I was talking about. Good quality Buffalo Sharps rifles are hard to come by. Probably the most common version was the half-stock sporting rifle with the 50 caliber 2.78 inch chamber. This was called the Big 50 rifle. Sharps was also offering various globe size sets for their rifles, but these were intended for target shooters, not for hunters. For a hunter, the leather-style open rear sight is much more practical. At the peak of the company, the rifle was manufactured in 4 calibers, 40, 44, 45 and 50 caliber, the Big 50 caliber, with different cartridge case styles, like the bottleneck cases and the straight cases, and with different cartridge case lengths to accept more powder. Most of the cartridges offered by Sharps for the rifles were loaded with paper patch bullets. They were considered high-velocity, long-range hunting and target cartridges. The purpose of the paper patch was to prevent leading of the bore, as in the case of the modern jacketed bullets. And the reputation of these rifles was very good, both for accuracy and both for reliability, and it was strengthened by shooters like Billy Dixon, for example, who I already mentioned to you. Well, this buffalo hunter fired a really long-range shot on the 29th or 30th of June 1874, when his party of 28 hunters was surrounded by 700 Kiowa and Cheyenne warriors. He fired an over 1,000-yard shot and hit one of them, which forced them to leave, forced them to flee. So here it is how it happened according to his memoir. A party of about 15 Indians appeared on the edge of the bluff east of Adobe Walls Creek, and some of the boys suggested that I try the big 50 on them. The distance was not far from 7/8 of a mile. Well, in a later edition of the same book, he is telling it is 3/4 of a mile, so it is changing by time. I took careful aim and pulled the trigger. We saw an Indian fell from the horse. The others dashed out of a side behind a clump of timber. A few moments later, 2 Indians ran quickly on foot to where the dead Indian lay, seized his body, and scurried to cover. I was admittedly a good marksman, yet this was what might be called as a scratch shot. So how long actually this shot was? It's a good question because nobody really knows the position of the shooter and the target. According to later records, the military measured the distance and it was 1,538 yards. That's a lot. That's a great distance. But Billy Dixon is actually changing the distance. In the first edition, it is 7/8 of a mile. In the second edition of the same book, it is 3/4 of a mile. And if you check the 1914 edition of this book, which is available on the internet, by the way, under the image that shows the position where he was firing this shot, it says that it was 1,200 yards. So what was the distance? Nobody knows, but it was surely a long shot. No matter how I tried, I was not able to manage the leading issue with the grease groove bullets. It is said that even alloyed bullets are hard to control over 1,300–1,400 feet per second velocity. So I kept the same 100 grain powder charge, but changed the bullet to a 540 grain paper patch bullet cast from the same 1:30 thin lead alloy. The bullet is sized to 0.442 inch and paper patched the exact bore diameter of 0.450. There are 2 ways to set your bullet diameter. One is that I followed, patching to the bore diameter, so when I insert the cartridge into the chamber, the bullet will gently engage the rifling. You can also patch to the groove diameter. In this case you'll need a larger 0.444-446 bullet, and that will be patched to the 0.458-459 diameter. In this case, set the overall length so your bullet touches the forcing cone. Both methods can work well. By changing the bullet and cleaning the bore more extensively, the group immediately got tighter at 100 meters, so this seemed like a good direction. Another important milestone in the reputation of the Sharps rifles was the Creedmoor shooting matches. In 1877 in Creedmoor, the American team was meeting the British team. The American team was equipped with Sharps rifles and rolling block rifles, and they beat the British, who were still using muzzleloaders. And that was a very, very good marketing position for the Sharps. The greatest competitor of the Sharps rifle was the Remington rolling block, probably the most popular single-shot rifle of the time. It was manufactured in huge number for export, for military use, for everything. Both rifles were considered equally accurate, but the Sharp system was considered much safer. And the reason was that when you are charging the cartridge into the chamber of your rolling block rifle, and if you are closing the breech too fast, and if your firing pin is stuck or broken, well, then it can fire the cartridge without closing properly the breech, which means that the rifle can fire backwards. Well, this cannot happen on the Sharps rifle for sure. The model 1874 rifle was manufactured in different versions, like the sporting rifle, like the long-range rifle, the Schützen rifle, the mid-range rifle, the Creedmoor rifle. And it was chambered for 15 different cartridges. Probably the most important cartridge in the first half of the 70s was the 4477 cartridge. And when the company in 1876 relocated to Bridgeport from Hartford, well, then from that point, probably the 4570 became the most important cartridge caliber. The total number of model 1874 Sharps rifles could be around 6,500. But as at the end of the 70s, the buffalo hunt era was closing to the end as well, clouds started to gather above the Sharps company.
This is exactly the same cartridge as in the previous session, but now shot to 200 meters. It is most advisable to try to load at larger distances immediately, as the charge that groups at 100 meters can be still miserable at 200. This was a calm day, and the group was not bad at all, but still not close to the 1 minute of angle group. I also felt like I'm not over the leading issue, which seems strange with the paper patch bullets. This was the time when I had to stop for a month due to the muzzle-loading long-range World Championships, but this was the time when I realized the problem also. The same mistake I made with my muzzle-loading paper patch bullets. The paper was too short, so the 1 in 30 alloy bullet deformed too much and touched the rifling above the patching. First I gave my bore a good cleaning with 4-0 steel wool to get rid of the lead deposit in the grooves. This method is also something I learned from my long-range shooter friends at the World Championships. So I chose a bullet with a shorter ogive, I hardened my alloy to 1:20 tin lead, and I used a taller paper patch before moving on to the next shooting session. Look close and you will see the lead that I removed from my bore.
The last single-shot rifle of the Sharps Rifle Company to market was the Sharps Borchardt rifle. It was a hammerless rifle. It was put on the market in 1878, and this was their really last design. It was an excellent rifle, by the way, but it did not look anything like the old Sharps rifles. It was rather looking like a high-bore rifle without a hammer. By 1879, only 40 caliber and 45 caliber rifles were in production. If somebody wanted to buy a 44 caliber or 50 caliber Sharps, he had to place a custom order. The last international prize that the company won was in the same year. It was issued by Franz Josef, the Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, my country by that time. It was a large gold medal. But by 1881, the company was closed forever, and since that time, only reproduction manufacturers making these beautiful rifles for us, like Pedersoli.
So my final charge was 100 grains of 1.5F Swiss powder, a grease cookie between two cardboard leads, a 540 grain paper patch bullet size to the bore diameter. If you want to know more about the hand loading procedure, please visit patreon.com/capandball.
Let's talk a bit about the history of the 120 cartridges. The story starts with the 4570 cartridge. It was accepted for service in 1873, and the concept came from the British small-bore military muzzle-loading rifles that were used by the Confederate and the Union snipers as well during the American Civil War, and they proved quite accurate. In these cases, the charge was very close to the American Civil War time service charge of 60 grains of black powder, and the bullet was a 45 caliber bullet with weighing around 540 grains. So actually, this was united into the 4570 cartridge. But the 4570 cartridge has its limits. First of all, it has a curved trajectory, and if you are shooting to larger distances, then you need a flatter trajectory. There are two reasons for this. First, if your bullet is flying less time on a lower trajectory, it is affected less by the environmental circumstances. Second, it will make your sight much more comfortable, because if you have a higher velocity bullet, then you can lower your sights. You don't have to shoot in a high angle. Also, it will make your rifle more comfortable because the comb can support your face, which is important for shooting accurately. So how can one improve the ballistics performance of a cartridge like this? Well, if you need a flatter trajectory, you need more velocity. If you need more velocity, you need more powder. If you have more powder, then you need more volume in the case, which means a longer case. And this is actually what happened. So there came the 4590, which was actually born as an express cartridge, meaning it fired in the beginning, of course, in the beginning, a lighter bullet. And then came the 4510, and then later the 4520. And the bison is big. A really big male can be around 2,000 pounds. It's a big game. That's a very, very big game. So if you want to reach the vital organs, you have to have a good penetration. For that, you need a bullet weight and, of course, the bullet hardness. And you need a flat trajectory if you're shooting to distances up to 300, 400 yards. Let's not forget that the hunters were not using diopter sights like this, but the open sights or early telescope sights. So increasing the powder charge and the velocity was a must, and also increasing the diameter of the bullet to have a better punch. For example, the 5090 was probably the most liked cartridge of that era. Penetration could also be increased by alloying the bullet with tin. This made the alloy harder, which means that it deformed less upon impact, and if it deformed less upon impact, it transferred less of its kinetic energy to the game, which means that it could penetrate deeper into the body of the bison. These exotic calibers were present during the buffalo hunt era, but probably the most of the bison and buffalo were shot with traditional cartridges like the 4570 500 or the 4570 405 cartridges, because they were available. The legendary 4520 or 45 3¼ inch sharp straight cartridge, as it should be called, well, it appeared at the last years of the buffalo hunt era, and it did not play too much role in killing the buffaloes.
Actually, there's a historical proof that the 100 grain charged 45 3¼ inch cartridge existed as well, loaded with a PP bullet. So judged by the components, we can consider my solution historically accurate as well. And this is my final 200-meter session before moving on to larger distances, shooting the hardened alloyed bullets with taller patching. Lubricant of the cartridge is the grease cookie. The day is a bit windy, but still beautiful for shooting the beast. it starts to group. And the last one is there. The wind caused a bit of horizontal spread, but the rifle and the cartridge looks to me very good now. Even after firing more than 15 shots that day, the group did not increase.
The history of the 45-120 is quite interesting because this cartridge probably appeared only at the end of the decade, meaning 78 or 79. And if you check the available books about the Sharps rifles, you will find that there are no Sharps rifles that were from the factory chambered for this round. It's kind of misleading because we call this the Sharp Straight, the 45 3" and a quarter Sharp Straight cartridge. So what's the deal in this? There are some quotes, there are some memories that say that 120 grain powder loaded Sharps cartridge did exist at the beginning of the decade as well. And this is true, The well-known buffalo hunter Frank Meyer stated in 72-73 in his memoirs he was using a rifle, a Sharps rifle, a 45 caliber Sharps rifle that was firing a cartridge that was holding 120 grains of powder. Now how can this happen? So we have a cartridge that is appearing at the end of the decade, but somebody is using it at the beginning of the decade. And Meyer is not lying in this case, because according to the 1877 catalog of the Sharps Rifle Company, in our sporting 45 caliber rifles chambered for the 2.78 shell, which means that the 45-110 shells, holding 100 to 120 grains of powder, capacity of the shell largely dependent upon the grade of powder used and the care exercised in slowly filling it. So actually, it seems like it was possible to put 120 grains of powder into the 110 cases as well. So probably this can solve the question of Frank Meyer.
Just to increase the confusion, Winchester also had a cartridge holding close to 120 grains of powder. Thus this is a bottleneck express cartridge, not interchangeable with our hero.
We also know that Meyer reloaded his own cartridges. He was selecting the best powder as possible. He was weighing the powder charge by weight, not by volume, and he preferred paper patch bullets. So the 45 120 cases and cartridges, they came in 78-79, which means that there is a very little chance that we can find a Sharps rifle that was in factory chambered for this round. And actually, when this cartridge appeared, there were immediately two powder charges for that. So we can find the 45 120 and 45 125 cartridge as well. These are actually the same dimensions, so the 125 cartridges fit in the chamber of the 120 cartridge. The only difference between the two cartridges is the capacity of the case, which was a bit more in case of the 125 cartridge. The muzzle velocity of the bullet fired from the 120 case was somewhere around 1,500 feet per secondum, firing a 500 or 540, 50 grain bullet, which is quite a lot compared to the 4570 cartridges. It is also quite interesting that one of the largest metallic case manufacturers, Union Metallic Cartridge, started the production of the 45 120 Sharps cartridges only in 1884. So probably this was the time when these cartridges reached some kind of popularity. Reloading the cartridges today is a beautiful hobby, but back in the 19th century it could mean life or death to be able to reload the cartridges in the field. So Sharps was actually marketing the reloading tools for the cartridge as well. And in the year 1879 catalog, they give a proper and very detailed instruction about how to reload the cartridges. Now let's check it how it should have been done. So first it started with the preparation of the case. First it was unprimed, and then it was washed in hot water with a little brush in the inside and on the outside as well. If it was not possible to clean the cases immediately after shooting and the black powder residue hardened, then for 5 minutes you had to put it into vinegar, and after that it was washed in the same way in hot water. After cleaning, the cases were dried, and after drying it was reprimed. After repriming, there came the powder charging period. The powder was 100 grains of good quality black powder. In smaller capacity cases, it was charged through a 30-inch long drop tube. The top of the powder column had to be at least 1/16 of an inch below the mouth of the case. On top of the powder, there was a paper wet from drafting paper, and then the bullet inserted with the thumb carefully, not to harm the paper patching. When it was done, then the bullet seating tool was used to firmly insert the bullet on the top of the powder, and of course it crimped the case mouth on the bullet.
The 45 120 cartridge is definitely a good cartridge. It is not an easy go, but with some patience you'll find your load. So don't let those negative comments fool you. The 3 1/4 inch cartridge and the Pedersoli 1874 Sharps will do the job.
So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. You have been watching the Capandball YouTube channel. If you like what I do, then please subscribe, share, comment and like. This will help to grow the channel. If you wish to support me, you can do it through Patreon. Please check our Patreon page for further information about exclusive contents and also about the benefits I can offer for the supporters. You can also find us on History of Weapons and War platform. This is an ad-free platform, a paid platform. So ladies and gentlemen, up until next time, please stay cool and keep your powder dry.